and your life.
Very good afternoon to one and all present here. I am Mosmi Samal and moderator of this session. First of all, I would like to welcome all of you for joining us for the webinar entitled Milk, White or Black. We all are aware regarding the importance of milk in our day-to-day life. It is used extensively by all age groups across the world. Hence, it is necessary to understand how safe is it. To discuss regarding this, we have an expert who will make us understand through this webinar the reason behind the title, that is Milk, White or Black. This webinar is a part of the project entitled Risk Management and Prevention of Antibiotic Resistance, and the logo of this project is Preventive. This project consists of 11 consortium partners, and that includes 5 Indian universities, 4 European universities, and 2 Indian NGOs. The main objective of this project is to prevent antibiotic resistance. Now let me discuss regarding the objective of this webinar. After attending the webinar, the attendees will be able to gain insight about issues of antibiotic residues in milk, understand various prevention and control measures to address antibiotic residues in milk, and understand the concept of One Health approach in combating antimicrobial resistance. Regarding the details of the webinar, it is being conducted on Zoom, and we are directly streaming it on YouTube so that we can reach maximum participation. It is obvious that while listening to the expert, some questions will arise in our mind. So there is a chat box maybe on the bottom or right side of your screen. So you can use that to type questions. While typing the question, please write hashtag ask preventive so that we will understand that these are the questions you are going to ask to our speaker. I repeat it again, while typing the question, please write hashtag ask preventive so that we will understand that these are the particular questions you are going to ask to our speaker. The question will be addressed at the end of the session, which will be approximately 15 minutes. I would also like to add that the webinar is being recorded. So in case their family, friends, and colleagues are unable to attend the session right now, they can listen to it later on, and the session will be uploaded in the official website of the Preventive Project and Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Now I would like to introduce the speaker of the day. So the expert speaker of the webinar is Professor Alfonso Zecconi. I will share some key points of his long profile. He is a doctor of veterinary medicine and specialist in epidemiology and public health statistics, member of European College Hard Health Management graduate, and Italian expert in IDF-SC animal health and welfare. He is full professor of epidemiology and infectious disease and former director of the specialization school in milk and milk product hygiene and technology at University of Milano. His research area is mainly focused on epidemiological studies on risk factors for mastitis, both clinical and subclinical, development of dairy hard health management programs in association with prudent use of antimicrobials. The result of his research activities are currently applied in fields implementing hard health management program for mastitis and other infectious disease in dairy cattle. He is the author or co-author of more than 460 scientific papers or communication in international and national journals and meetings. So, on behalf of the audience and Preventive team, I would like to thank Dr. Alfonso Zecconi for accepting our invitation and sparing valuable time for from his busy schedule to speak on this webinar. Welcome to you, Dr. Alfonso Zecconi, and we are looking forward to the interacting session.
Thank you for a very nice introduction. Thank you for inviting me to this webinar. I'm real in some way emotional for that, because it's to Indian audience means to talk with a lot of people. For me, coming from a relatively small country, so I hope they will give you interesting information. I hope, and I will do my best to do it. So the title is a bit controversial because in some way there is issue on the quality of milk, on the safety of milk. It should be addressed, and very important is the aspect related to the antimicrobial resistance. So we go through this topic in a very simple way, trying to give the simple information, be helpful for a wide audience. So this is the structure of my presentation. We have a very short introduction on the several aspects concerning the problem of milk. the current scenario in India concerning milk production, the reason why we have antimicrobial, may we have antimicrobials in milk, how to detect them, and very important, how to prevent and control this problem in the milk and the dairy cows. Going to the introduction, we need to define some terms, because I assume that the audience will have different scientific background. So one important point is to define what means antimicrobial agent. This was defined by the World Organization of Animal Health, OAE is the name, and these are natural occurring semi-synthetic or synthetic substances that exhibit antimicrobial activities. So from this point of view, we are not including this definition disinfectants, antiseptics, or anti-meltings. So it's mainly substances directed against the microbes. And the other important component of the definition is antimicrobial resistance. The antimicrobial resistance is a natural effect of that is present in the microbes, including bacteria, viruses, parasites, and fungi, and is naturally develops in these microbes. We can accelerate this process, this development, when we use antimicrobials not in a proper way. So when we overuse or misuse these antimicrobials to fight the microbes. This problems is common both to human and veterinary medicines. It's nothing related only one of the two sides. And in terms of amount and use of antimicrobials, human side is still the most important part. So the treatment of veterinary in the veterinary field is important, but on average is not as important as the human side. So this is important to know from this point of view. And why we are talking about AMR now much more than in the past. As you probably know, the antimicrobials became very common and very used after the Second World War, and the major molecule at that time was penicillin. When Fleming discovered penicillin, he had already know that you can have bacteria resistant to penicillin. How we cope with the problem of resistance at that time? Through the development, the discovery of new antibiotics for many years. So you see here the figures, but from 50 to 80s, every year we have a new class of antibiotics, and this new class of antibiotics are able to cope with the antimicrobial resistance developed by the previous classes of antibiotics. So we have every year we have new molecules that could get rid of, partially get rid of the antimicrobial resistance for both bacteria or microbes in human and veterinary medicine. The problem started to become important after 80s, because after 80s we don't have any new antibiotics. Only now there are some of them in the pipeline to be applied in human medicine, but not in veterinary medicine. So for more than 40 years, we have no new classes of antibiotics. We can have new products, new names, but no new classes and no new antibiotics. So the antimicrobial resistance cannot be not controlled by the new molecules, and became a real problem in both human and veterinary medicine. Another important concept to consider when we talk about antimicrobial resistance is the approach. The approach that now is suggested that the most important international agencies is the One Health approach. What means One Health? One Health means that people that are working in the protection of human, or animal, and environmental health should collaborate, should communicate, and should coordinate their work to achieve the best health outcomes for these three major areas: people, animals, plants, and in general an environment. In simple words, that means that when we protect one of this area, human, animal, of environment, we protect all these areas. So these three areas are strictly connected. And to give you a more in some way complicate but more comprehensive picture, under the umbrella of One Health, we have several different topics such public health, veterinary medicine, human medicine, and you see all the other one. I will emphasize the aspect of zoonotic infection is really one of the important parts under the One Health umbrella, and even more important, within zoonotic infection, we have antimicrobial resistance. So this is is defined as a disease, and is defined as a disease within the zoonotic infection. This is very important to consider this problem under the definition and under the One Health approach. So in this way, when we want to fight AMR with a One Health perspective, as the WHO suggests, we need to work together and to work to consider that human health, animal health, and environmental health are strictly connected. And if we want to have a success in fighting AMR, we need to integrate our effort in this way. So we need to work in a more comprehensive, holistic approach, and what we can say One Health approach to fight AMR. Finally, as we say, last but not least, we have to talk about milk. So the role of milk in the human life. Milk is very important, you know, is essential for babies, but is very important also for adult people. It's important for nutrition because milk and milk products are an important part in the diet and will improve the quality of the diet. They are also very, very important for the health. There are a huge amount of scientific evidence that eating dairy or dairy products will help to increase the health of human being. And this is related to what is called the dairy matrix. That means that milk is not to consider as a component of single molecules, minerals, or vitamins, but it must be seen as a whole metabolic complex that give an effect. The positive effect is much more important than the effect of the single component. So, in other words, I cannot have the same effect assuming milk with some vitamins, and as we take each single vitamin as in the diet. So the milk will give you a much higher level of nutrition and much important effect on health than introducing the single component of the milk or of other dairy products. The other very important aspect is the social one. In many, many countries, including my country, and I'm sure including your country, dairy farming has an important role even from the social point of view, because it is a way to preserve environment, to preserve culture and tradition in the population. So this is an important component of farming, dairy farming. This sometimes is forgotten, but is as important as the other aspect. And finally, and again, last but not least, the problem of money. So milk is an important source of money, and India, as you probably know, is the largest world producer of milk. India produces 22% of the world production of milk, and livestock represent 28% of the agricultural GDP, gross domestic product. So even from the economic point of view, is an important aspect of the life. So looking at the current scenario in India, to emphasize the importance of milk and milk production in India, I will show you some of the data I collected through different agencies in the world. First of all, the co-numbers. The co-numbers are impressive. You have about 550 millions of female buffaloes. They are producing milk, maybe very little, but they're producing milk. And you have nearly 250 millions of adult female cattle, again, the dairy cows. If you compare this number to the numbers of cows in USA, they are only 10 millions. In Europe, we have only 22 millions. In Italy, my country, we have less than 2 millions. So numbers are very large different. Where we have some positive difference in some, if you can say in this way, in the my country or the USA or Europe. When we talk about average milk yield, in USA, a single cow yearly produces 10 tons of milk. That means 10,000 liters. In Europe, 7.5 tons, and in Italy, more or less the same. In India, only 2.3 tons of milk. Why India is producing less? Because the dairy farming in Europe and USA are intensive, while in India you have an extensive kind of production. That doesn't mean there is bad or worse. Only there is a different way to breed cows. But overall, multiplying this number for the number of animals, as I said before, you are producing a lot of milk, and you are the largest world producer of milk. So milk is an important part of your life, even from an economical point of view. And this is confirmed by the increase of the importance of the value of milk livestock in years. If you look at the last 6-7 years, you more than double the number in terms of value of the milk livestock. So if you have one as a reference in 2011, now is 114% in 2017-18. That means more and more value added in the milk livestock. And if you look at in general to the trend in production and in the increase of population, so the gray line represent the million of people in India. You see that gray line is really parallel to the increase in total milk production from 91 up to 2019. So they are very parallel. The blue line represents the amount of milk in grams available for each person per day. As you see, the increase of the availability of milk for the people is not really parallel to the first two lines. That means in the long term, this line will some way become parallel to the excesses. So that means that there is no more increase. That could be in a long term a potential problem of to having not enough milk, or to have less milk than now for the population, if the total milk production will not increase more in terms of yearly increase compared to the population. So you need to improve a little bit the total milk production, and this increase of milk production could be achieved through improvement of health of the animals. That means also to decrease the use of antibiotics and to increase the overall health of the animal and human population. Another interesting data is concerning the value of the milk for the consumer. If you look, these are the value in terms of the monthly expenditure for milk and milk products at urban or rural level. As you see in 70s, there is no difference in terms of value, but in 2010, the last time when we have data on that, you see the very huge difference in terms of cost of the milk and milk products in the urban area compared to the rural one. This is not surprising because in the urban area, people are on average richer, and also the cost of the milk is higher because normally milk in the urban area are supplied by companies, while in rural area can be in a local consumption, local producer, and the price will be lower. But if you see on the long term, if these two lines will diverge too much, that means that probably you will have less milk in the rural area because they prefer to sell it to companies to sell in the urban areas because they gain more money. So this will be another potential social problem if you are not increasing enough the production of milk. And when I'm talking increasing means that we need to have increase in health for the animals mainly to increase the production. And the other point that is emphasize the importance of milk and milk products in India is the fact that you spend more compared, for instance, to my country for milk products than that in Italy. You see 10% of the food expenditure are milk and milk products, while we spend less than 2%. Even we consume more or less the same amount of fluid milk in our two countries. Even we consume very likely more cheese, but in terms of fluid milk, we consume the same amount of milk on average, obviously. And finally, back to our problem, so antimicrobial resistance. And you can see here the hotspot of resistance. This graph represents the proportion of antimicrobial compounds with resistance higher than 50%. So the more reddish color, the more critical is the problem. You see that I assume that the area where the red color are higher probably are the area where there is much more livestock. But you can see that the colors, we can say the reddish colors, is spread all over the Indian country. So this is important to recognize the presence of this problem at country level. So some consideration of this first part of my presentation. I think it's clear to everybody at this point that dairy sector is very important for India. And the number of animals, the milk production is an important part of Indian cultural heritage. So we must not forget this part of the component of the milk production, the cultural part. And for the same reason, the dietary role of milk and milk products is in some way more important in your country than in other countries, since we know in the so-called Western country, we introduce proteins through other way, meats, first of all, while in your country, milk is one of the major source of proteins for the human population. So this is another important thing to consider when we talk about the dairy production. And this implies, from the scientific and medical point of view, we need to increase and maintain a safety production of milk. So we need that the milk is safe both from bacteriological pathogen point of view and for the antimicrobial resistance point of view. So we need to prevent the transmission of diseases, so mainly the zoonosis, and through that to prevent the spread of AMR in the human population. And now I try to give some advice, if we can call it this way, some suggestion how to do it. So why we have antimicrobial residues in milk? The sources are different. The most obvious one are the treatment of the animals to control diseases. The most important one is mastitis, because it's affecting milk production directly. The mastitis is still the most important production disease in the world for dairy animals. But animals can have also other diseases. So again, it could be treated with antimicrobials. Then we have more indirect way to give antimicrobials to the animals. One is growth promoters. Growth promoters are forbidden in many countries, are forbidden since 20 years in Europe, a little bit less in USA, but they are still allowed in India. So that means that in some cases, cows could be fed with feed with some growth promoters. It's not common, it's not very, they are a little bit expensive, so they are not a really common thing, but it could happen. And the other important part is contamination of food and water by other sources. So we can have environmental contamination of food and water, even from human sewage. So it's not only from animal origin. And then there will be a connection through the environment from the human spread of AMR, and then the transmission of that to the animals. So we have to also to take care, as I said before, when we talk about One Health approach, that the environment could be a source of bacteria with AMR, and in some cases also of antimicrobials. So we must be very careful from this point of view. The other point I would like to emphasize that antimicrobials are not bad. They are a tool that help to increase the health of human beings and of animals. We need to use them properly, but they are not to condemn them as something from the bad things. They are a good thing. They help us to keep the population healthy, to keep the animal and human being population healthy. So we need to use properly with a prudent approach, but we have to use it. And I try to summarize all this concept in a sort of infographics. It's not easy because there are so many interactions, but more or less this picture say what I said before. So we can have direct introduction of antimicrobials due to disease treatment. We can have the assumption of growth promoters through to feeding, and this will affect mainly or exclusively the gut flora. So we can have at the level of gut the development of pathogens and common flora with resistance, but also we can assume that through the environmental contamination. And again, this will be the target will be again the gut flora of the animals. Then the animals have to diffuse, could diffuse potentially the problems. One, through fecal contamination. Fecal contamination means that then we can have pathogens, and pathogens with AMR spread in the environment, spread even in terms of, in some cases, in food, and then means that the human being could be exposed to that. And again, it can have this kind of problem. The other very important part, as we said before, is milk. In milk, we can have residues of antimicrobials, and we can have pathogens and pathogens with AMR. Again, through the consumption of milk and milk products, the human being could be exposed to that and develop AMR. From this point of view, I really want to emphasize that all this potential risk happens only when controls are not applied. Controls of milk and milk products is something that is implemented in many countries since 50, 60 years, and maybe the technology changes, but the approach is the same, and it's a very strict control approach. If we are working properly from this point of view, we are decreasing significantly the risk to have this exposure of the human being to pathogens and to pathogens with AMR and to residues. So controls is a very important part of this picture, and we talk a little bit about that in later during this presentation. And finally, to talk about treatment, these are sales data of antimicrobials in Europe, and I focus on intramammary preparation, the direct way to supplement to supply antimicrobials to the cow, to administer antimicrobials to the cow. And you see that on the overall picture, only 0.5% of the sales in Europe are regarding intramammary preparation. So this means that even if the problem could be present at dairy farming level, or in dairy cows and in milk, the risk is much, much lower compared to the risk that we have with the poultry and pigs production. So the production of this livestock, the exposure to antimicrobials is much, much higher when compared to meat production. So we have to take care of the problem, but we are not the major source of the problem for in general for human and veterinary medicine. So when we talk about antimicrobials in milk, we have to think about that the amount and persistence of these antimicrobials in the milk depends on several factors: the pharmaceutical preparation, the way of administration, the substances that we are supplying, the amount we administer, and also the animal health condition. It could be in some way strange to think about, but a diseased animal tend to have in milk and in his body the antimicrobials longer than healthy animals. Healthy animals is able to get rid of the antimicrobials in a shorter time compared to a diseased one. So diseased animals are more risky compared to the healthy one. And these antimicrobials and their residues might be measured, and there are methods to measure them in order to assess the risk for human health. So we know the residue can be present at milk level, and we know the amount of these residues that can be dangerous for the human being. Therefore, we are able to define levels below that there is no risk for human being. These levels and this measure is called maximum residue limits, or MRL. The maximum residue limits is the maximum allowed concentration of a residue of antimicrobial in any food products, so milk or other eggs or meat. And when the authorities, based on scientific data, define the MRL, this means that if the level is below the level, there is no toxicological hazard for human health. So you can have a positive milk for an antimicrobials, but if it's below MRL, this milk is not risky for the human health. And this is important because in the past, the people ask for zero residues. Zero residues is a nonsense from a scientific point of view. It's only related to the quality of the detection system. Now the detection system are so sophisticated that you can find always something. But this something in most of the cases is below the maximum residue limits, therefore the food is safe. So for each food and for each antimicrobial product, it must be a maximum residue limits and should be defined differently for the different kind of product, meat, milk, eggs, or others. Together with the maximum residue limits, another important measure is the withdrawal time. So when you treat an animal with antimicrobials and also for other veterinary products, there is an interval between the last administration and the time when the foodstuff can be consumed by the person, by the consumers. This time is related to the MRL we say before, and obviously by the type of antimicrobials and products we are administering to the animals. If you wait the withdrawal time, after that the milk or in general the food is safe for consumption. Within the withdrawal time, if you eat this foodstuff, you are taking a very high risk to introduce antimicrobials in your body and then to develop AMR. This aspect is very important because in many cases, the producers are not really aware of that if they are not properly educated, properly instructed by veterinarians, by health authorities. And this could happen particularly when in area with poor people there, because they say, okay, I have milk. Milk for me is important to survive, and even have treatment, I drink this kind of product. It will be obviously a very risky habit for the people, and also this is also a risky for the animals, because if you give this product for instance to calves, they can develop antimicrobial resistance and then to have problems later in life. I will also say that sometimes, and this is something that is happening in my country, I guess will happen also in your country, people say, okay, I will not use the pharmaceutical preparation. I will use natural remedies, herbal remedies, because they have no withdrawal time, they have no MRL, so I can do what I want. Unfortunately, this is not a very safe approach, because as we know, many of these products could contain natural antimicrobial component, but you don't have any information on the withdrawal time, you don't have any information of the amount of these antimicrobials that you can have in these products. And then you are increasing antimicrobial resistance, thinking to do the opposite. And again, this is an important aspect that should be addressed by advisors, by the veterinarians, by the people that should really inform and educate the population that the natural remedies are important, could be effective, but could be also risky, as well as the we can call commercial or scientific, even if they are not scientific from a technical point of view, antimicrobials. So it's important to not to ignore that the natural or herbal remedies could also be a source of antimicrobial resistance from this point of view. And all the things are valid, again, if you are doing the things properly, following the rules. If you administer 2 times the drug or for more time than what is defined, for instance, 2 times, we give 4 times, we cannot say that withdrawal time is only doubling. Most of the time will be more than the doubling the time, and the MRL will be different. So again, all these things are valid only if we are following the rules. We are not following the rules, the problems could be could be worse. So again, to summarize a little bit this concept, if I know how to treat the animal with administration, the dosage, the timing, I know the importance and interaction with the withdrawal time and with animal condition, I'll be able to produce milk or other foodstuff below the MRL so they will be safe for human being. How we can detect that? We can do a screening test. The screening tests are available normally for farmers. They are not very expensive in general. They are able to give an answer in a short time. In the case of microbial inhibitor test, in 3 hours, and that means that most of them are based on the development of Bacillus stereothermophilus. If you have any antimicrobial in the milk, the bacillus will not develop and they will not change the pH of the tube they are using to do the test. I will show a picture in the next slide. More sophisticated, more expensive, more rapid are the immune receptor tests. The immune receptor tests are very specific. You have to know which kind of antimicrobial you use and to look for that through the immune receptor test. You can have an answer in 10 minutes, very, very short, but in general, it's much more expensive. To picture on the left, you have the so-called Delvo test. Is the most famous of the microbiological tests. You see that the tubes with the purple color, inside the tube there is the bacillus. When you introduce the milk, if the milk has antimicrobials inside, after 3 hours, the bacillus will not develop and the color will not change because will not a change in the pH. Vice versa, if the milk is safe with no antimicrobials, the bacillus will grow up and it will change the color of the tube, and then you say this is negative. This is a classical SNAP test for the immune test. You put a drop of milk in this area, and then you will see a line showing that is positive or negative. It's very similar to the pregnancy test that we can use in for human side. If you want to have a confirmational presence of the antimicrobials, normally this is done when there are legal problems or in general problems. They need to have a more sophisticated definition of the amount or the type of the molecule present in the foodstuff, in the milk in our case. You have to go through HPLC and mass spectrometry. I will not really talk about that, but there is, after screening test, there is another step to confirm the presence of the antimicrobials. So having the problem, having the way to measure it, and then we can do some prevention and control. Prevention and control is based on different approaches. The first one that was introduced recently from the World Health Organization is the antimicrobial ranking. We can rank the antimicrobials if they can be used or not for human and for veterinary animals instead of humans. Then you can work on from the beginning on the farm level with good farming practices. You can work with the veterinarians, with the food processing industry, and also with health authorities. We will see this aspect in a few seconds. So what means ranking? WHO and OIE, they rank the antimicrobials in 4 categories. The most important one is SPCCA, highest priority critical important antimicrobials. which include mainly quinolones and third and higher generation cephalosporins, macrolides, ketolides, glycopeptides, and polymyxins. All these molecules cannot be used practically in the veterinary field now, at least in our country, in Europe. And this is a trend that will go worldwide because it's coming from international organization. Then we have the critically important antimicrobials that will be used with some restriction, and then in some way highly important, but then you can use in veterinary field. What we did applying this concept at European level is to ranking the antimicrobials in 4 categories. Again, they are related to the previous one, but they are not exactly the same as the previous one. In Europe, we have the category A, that means avoid. The antibiotics that are reported in this, listed in this category, cannot be used in any situation for animals. They only authorize for human medicine. If you are using that for an animal, both if it's a pet animal, a companion animal, or a food-producing animal, you will be persecuted from the health authorities. Then you have the category B, restrict, that are similar, very similar to HPCIA that we saw before for WHO. And in this category, you have all the quinolones and the cephalosporins, but not the macrolides. In practically, you are not authorized to use these molecules for veterinary medicine unless there is the only way to do it, and it's very difficult to have this kind of situation in practice. Then we have the category C, that means caution. In this case, we have the antibiotics that can be used in animals, but if you have an evidence from a diagnostic lab saying that all the antibiotics included in the list of prudence are not effective against the bacteria you found. So if you have all the category D as resistant, then you can use antibiotics in category C. And then the final one is the normal antibiotics you can use for in veterinary medicine, and they are not really critical for human being in terms of resistance. So for veterinarians and for farmers, these classes will give a sort of barrier to use some of the different antibiotics, and this is very important because then will in some way teach the people how to use in a proper way antibiotics. And also the other very important things, oblige to the farmers and veterinarians to measure the sensitivity of the bacteria in respect the different antimicrobial substances. And this will, I will see, we can do through different systems. The most common one is antibiogram. The other point is the good farming practices. So we go to the basics, we go to the farmer, and the farmer should follow some simple rules. One of the very simple one is to choose breeds and animals that are well suited to the local environment. It's not seeking for high producing animal for itself, but to see what is really is fitting properly with the different situation in terms of environment, in terms of social system and farming system, and not only seeking high production. The other important part, obviously, is to try to avoid the entry of disease into the farm, which is called biosecurity. This is not always easy to do, but is an important step in trying to break the chain of diffusion of the diseases, mainly in this case of the zoonotic ones. So this is something that could be done if the information, education are supplied to the farmer. And as we said many times before, it's important to use antimicrobials as directed, following a prudent use of them. What can do the veterinarians is to do his job, so to assess the requirements for antimicrobial treatment, so we need to do it or not, to select an appropriate antimicrobial product, and this means, as you see, I already said, we'll see through a sensitivity analysis of the bacteria exposed, challenged with the different antimicrobials, give a clear advice on the appropriate use of the antimicrobial agent to the farmer, and very important, to review the treatments, both in terms of efficacy and in terms of residues. So I say before, the sensitivity resistance is important component of the work for a veterinarian. This is in a picture, very simple antibiograms, and most classical, less expensive one, but now we can go even to very sophisticated and relatively more expensive systems that also do minimum inhibin concentration, given more precise definition of sensitivity and resistance. To give you an information from this point of view, now in Europe, this is compulsory. A veterinarian cannot treat an animal if he does or she doesn't have a lab report on sensitivity and resistance of the bacteria that can be found in the farm. So this is part of a compulsory approach to reduce AMR at farm level, not only for dairy, but for all the livestock. Dairy processor, when they are present and they are working, obviously they have their own responsibility. They have to provide clear specification how to produce the raw material, that in our case is the milk, to detect and exclude the contaminated supply. This supply should be destroyed, should not be going to the environment, because they will increase the exposure to antimicrobials and to residues. And internally, they have to adapt the hazards management. That means to a system that is able to reduce the microbiological risk. And this is a normal part of the dairy food industry nowadays in all the countries. And obviously, they also to be proactive, promoting the quality of the production, giving premiums or penalties, economic penalties economic premium, obviously, to the farmers. This is a very well known and very old system that pays off. So when the dairies give premiums and penalties to the farmers, the quality and the safety of the production, in our case of the milk, will increase very rapidly. If you leave only to the willingness or the goodwill of the people, the improvement will be very, very slow. Sometimes it doesn't happen. When you give premium penalties, the system will adapt very rapidly and will look for premiums, because it will be an important part of the price of the milk, and they will give in a relatively short time very important improvements. And then we have the health authorities. Health authorities have the duty to assess the suitability of antimicrobial agent for the treatment, to implement controls on the supply of the microbial agents, and also on the supply of the food. So what we talked about controls before, the health authority must control the quality and the safety of the milk as a raw milk and the milk products once they have been processed. And also to monitor the adverse outcome of antimicrobial use, so to be aware of the potential outbreak of problems maybe in some areas or in some foodstuffs. So it is important the health authorities did also their job from this point of view. So coming to a conclusion, I try to again to summarize some of the information in this slide, in this graph. This is important because in many cases, even the international health authorities tend to give the same importance of the AMR developed in animals and developed in human beings. In my opinion, this is not true, because if we see on the left side of the picture, we can have treatment with antimicrobials of a human being, both at hospital level and at home. This is a direct exposure of the human being to antimicrobials, and the risk to develop AMR is high anyway. If in a hospital, normally I expect that the patient will be treated after a sensitivity test, as I said before, for animal being. At least in the experience that we have in my country and in general in European country, at home, the doctors following the people at home give the indication to apply different kind of antibiotics without doing any sensitivity test. So is a little bit paradoxical, but at least in our country, if you are a vet, you must do a sensitivity test and antibiogram. If you are a physician, a family doctor, you have not this, you are not obliged to do that. So as a family doctor, you are taking much more risk than a veterinarian. So from this point of view, the probability to develop AMR from human side, in my opinion, is much higher. And once you have the AMR, that could go back, obviously, at hospital. And there are in some hospital, this is a very important problem. But also it could spread also in the family. But through the sewage to all this kind of from human population, you can also have a contamination of the environment, and from the environment, the AMR can come back both to the human side or to the animal side. So again, we have an interaction between the three areas: human, environment, and animal. When you look at the animal side, as we say before, we have the treatment or the exposure to the environment, but then, and we can have also the development of AMR, but then we have controls. Controls, we say, are related to both to the health authority controls, but also to the production side of controls. And then we have also another important part of the of control that is in some way done directly. We have the heat treatment of the milk. Normally, milk is treated, should or must be at least pasteurized. It could be boiled. Boiling will decrease the quality of the milk, but will kill all the bacteria present. So the heat treatment is a very important barrier to both the presence of pathogens and pathogen with AMR in the final product. So this will be an important step to avoid the problem. Step is not present, for instance, when we talk about the human being. The same for dairy products. When you produce a cheese, a yogurt, or other dairy products, there will be always a heat treatment, and there will be also the fermentation that could help to decrease the amount of pathogens, amount of the resistant pathogens. To give you a very simple example, if you want to produce a cheese, and in the cheese there is, in the milk that you are using to produce cheese, there is antimicrobials, you are not able to produce the cheese because antimicrobials will kill all the lactic bacteria that are needed to produce the cheese. So there are so many direct and indirect ways in the milk that in some way they reduce the potential risk for human being. For this reason, I think and really believe that the risk related to milk production actually is much lower than the risk that we can have, for instance, in treatment of human being during normal life, you can say. So to finalize my presentation, AMR is a worldwide problem, no doubt about that. We need to approach that by One Health. So this is the important and very effective way to cope with this problem. Dairy farming is not a major source of AMR for human beings and for animals, and there's clear evidence of that. Despite that, dairy farming should continue to work to improve the quality and the safety of the milk and the milk products. So this will be, in any case, something must be done. And all the components of the dairy production chain, from farmers, veterinarians, health authorities, dairy processors, should do their best to maintain the health of the animals and the safety of the milk. This should be a mission for all the food production chain. And definitely for me, milk is white, is not black, and there is no way to show that it is black. Thank you. I will be happy to answer to your questions.
Thank you very much, sir, for the interesting talk. It was really a pleasure listening to you. We have received some questions. As we have less time left, maybe I will not able to take all the questions from all the participants. Still, we will try to take as many as we can do in the least possible time. The first question is from Jaspal Singh. How can antibiotics act as a growth promoters?
Because what we know about growth promoters, they are able to modulate the gut flora in any animals, from chicken to cow. There is no, I mean, the mechanism is the same. Obviously, the effect could be different. Modulating the gut flora, they are promoting the flora that are helping to synthesize more nutrients for the animals, in some way eliminating or reducing the pathogen present in the gut. So practically, the growth promoters are applying a treatment, a very mild treatment, reducing the pathogens and improving the positive commensal flora of the gut. And this is resulting in a faster and better growth of animals.
Sir, as you said in your initial slide, India does not have an intensive farming system as compared to US or Europe. There are a large number of small-scale farmers who will be selling the milk for their daily living. So withdrawal time means it would affect their daily income and their daily life. So is there any alternative, or how can we basically make them understand on the importance of withdrawal time?
I say this way, I understand the problem, and I'm sure this will be a big problem for small rural or small family farms, because I said before, and you say very clearly, this is an important source of food for them. When you treat, honestly, there is no way to discard the milk. You cannot use the milk because it's too risky for the family. The only real way is to avoid to have diseases. This is nice to say, not so easy to do, but it can be done. So mainly when you have very 1, 2, 4 animals, it's much easier to keep this animal out of the disease than when you have 1,000. So in this case, the prevention of disease is the key for both have more milk for the family and to avoid treatments. It's important, I said before, to consider that you can have also risk if you are not using antimicrobials chemical, we can say this way, even are not really chemical, and you use herbal remedies. You can have the same kind of problem. So education, in my opinion, will be the key to improve a lot this aspect.
Sir, what about the infant milk formula that are given to the newborn? Is not there
I cannot get you. Could you repeat, please?
Sir, infant milk formula that are given to the newborns, is there any risk of antibiotic residues in that powder as well?
You mean for baby?
Yeah. Infant milk formula.
Yeah, the infant formula. Yeah, okay. Usually, the infant formula have more strict regulation than the normal milk. So if we look at the regulation, the way the companies, the large companies that you thought about, control this milk, I say the risk cannot be zero. Risk zero is non-existent in the real world, but will very, very negligible. So technically, the infant formula should be safer than normal milk. some mistake happens, and we have evidence of some mistake even in Europe in the past. But at least if you don't have problems, the infant formula is safe, and there should not have any antimicrobials in it over the MRL. You can have some antimicrobials, but below the MRL.
Okay. Sir, probably the last question. Considering the AMR scenario, is it advisable to use milk regularly, especially with the patients or children having some kind of infection?
So I mean, to use milk if you have infection in the cow. I can get the last part.
No. Actually, sir, as you have mentioned that maybe the antibiotic residues or antibiotic resistant genes are available in the milk. So, considering this scenario, is it safe or advisable to use milk regularly? Generally, people use consume milk regularly. So, is it safe for us, or especially for the patients or the children who are prone to infection or having some kind of infection?
Okay, if you control the milk, if your milk has no residue, so is a milk that is safe, I have no doubt that the milk will be very helpful even for the children. So milk from nutritional point of view is a very, very fantastic food. So I will advise, and I'm using it, and so I will always know to use it. It's important that milk is checked. So if you, as we said before, you're using milk in a cow treated during the withdrawal time, obviously this will be a problem higher for the children for an adult person. But if you follow the rules and if you don't supply unsafe milk, and then the milk will be daily very, very important. So I will in strict favor to use daily cheese or milk products.
Okay. So the boiling or pasteurization process can reduce level of antibiotic residue?
Not really. The pasteurization is not really effective in reducing in some cases, the amount of residues in the milk is good in reducing the presence of pathogens with AMR. So the pasteurization is really effective in reducing the introduction of pathogens that could be resistant. It's not so effective in reducing the residues. So the residues must be measured, and the value must be below the MRL.
Thank you very much, sir, for your valuable information, and also covering it with One Health and making us understand the importance of One Health in combating antimicrobial resistance. Thank you, sir. On behalf of the audience, and I would like to thank you again for sharing the experience with us, and we'll also like to thank Preventive team for working behind. I hope everybody had enjoyed the session and might not have any technical error, but we do apologize if somebody has faced some problem. As I have mentioned earlier, this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded in the official website of Preventive Project, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Sir, any message you would like to share with the audience from your side?
Thank you. It's a really pleasure. I really welcome, and I hope I give you some useful information. And thank you again for inviting me. It's a really honor for me to have this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, audience, for joining us. We do hope to come in future with another interesting topic. Thank you very much. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.
Bye-bye to everybody. Bye. Thank you.